Hey guys, Cravone here, and today I'm going to bring you an Araxxor guide. Now, the first thing I'm going to say is that if you are planning to Araxxor, watch the full guide first. Don't just start watching it whilst doing the fight itself. That's not going to work. Now, Araxxor has 3 different paths that he can take in Phase 2, and I'm going to cover each of them in depth after Phase 1. But essentially they go on a rotation where one is always blocked. Then of the 2 remaining, you get to pick one, and you have to deal with that path's mechanics. And this changes every 4 days. So I would recommend for beginners to start with the spider path blocked. You can see in the beast tab under the quest area. Now, Araxxor is located south of Port Phasm, and this is you can get here through the Ectofile, through the max skill portal, or even the Canopus lodestone. You could just run there like I normally do. Now, this guide is going to focus solely on using ranged. So if you're looking for melee or magic guide, you can watch this for the mechanics of the fight, but there are going to be changes, particularly with Rax's normal attacks. So bear that in mind. Now, weirdly, there's no actual official requirements. You can enter this boss regardless of anything. However, you're definitely going to want at least a tier 95 prayers. You're going to want at least level 96 Herblore for the overloads. Level 96 summoning for the pack yak. Now, you can take Beast of Burden that's sort of lower than this, but it's going to make it more difficult, especially those early kills. You also need level 99 in the attack style that you're using, 99 defense and 99 health. Now, I appreciate that is quite a lot, but this is one of the hardest fights in the game for a reason. Now, in terms of gear, you'll hear people who have managed to do this with a raw crossbow, but for someone who's new to the fight, this guide is sort of designed for them. So I'm going to recommend at least level 70 armor, preferably a level 80 plus. Anything lower than tier 90 weapons are not going to cut it here, I'm afraid. So tier 90 is the minimum, I'm going to say. For a neck piece, the Amulet of Souls is going to be extremely good here, but there are other options. Ring wise, you don't want to be using Ring of Wealth, that's useless here. So yeah, just sort of standard tier 80 plus armor, tier 90 weapons. Augmented gear is always a bonus here. You are going to need a lot of accuracy, so anything with precise 5 is going to be very good here. As for, well, Venom Blood is also going to be very good if you've got on your armor for Phase 4. Now, in terms of your auras, I would highly recommend using the accuracy aura of your damage type. Like, even if you're using magic, don't use dark magic, use runic accuracy, because Rax has really, really high defense. In terms of other auras, you could use Vampirism. I mean, Penance if you've absolutely got nothing else, but Penance isn't going to help you in combat. So you want either Vamp or one of the accuracy auras. Now, inventory setup. Some people use a shield. I personally don't, but a shield is there if you do want to try and resonance off something. The cleave is probably the best thing to resonance off if you are going to use it. So, aside from that, I manage 2 or 3 kills per trip. Some people manage more. But the setup I take, because I've got Venom Blood on my armor, I don't take anti-poison flasks. So I take a Holy Overload with me. Any overload will do. the higher level the better. I take 3 prayer flasks. Super restores again will do. I take an adrenaline potion. Replenishment will do as well. Effectively, this is going to be very important for phase 4. I take 15 Saradomin Brews. If you're taking an anti-poison plus plus, I'd recommend drop 1 Sour Brew for the anti-poison plus plus if you don't have Venom Blood. For the rest of it, I take the rest of my inventory Rocktails, and I fill my entire Beast of Burden with Rocktails. Now, before we get into the actual kill itself, I'm going to explain a few more things. Now, Rax has an Enrage, which means every time you kill Rax, basically gets 20% to damage, etc. Basically 20% Enrage, and this keeps stacking up until 300%. Now I'm going to explain the drop table a bit. Now, obviously Rax has a standard drop table and a rare drop table, the RDT. From this point on, I'm gonna call it the extra drop table, because it'll be less confusing. Now Rax himself or herself has a rare table, which is all the unique items which are just Rax only. This consists of 6 items. I'm not going to mention pets in this video. This covers 6 items. There is the bottom, middle and top leg pieces, and then there are the 3 hilts, which are the fang, the web and the eye. Now, the leg pieces can only be dropped if you do the corresponding path. So let's say we do the top path. The top piece of the leg will be the only piece of leg that can drop, and obviously this is a rare drop. You cannot trade leg pieces, but you can trade a full leg once you made it, so you'll have to get a piece from each path to actually create this, and this is about 140 mil if you're able to make them. Now, the second set of drops are the hilts, which is the fang, the eye and the web. The fang is basically the 140 mil drop, which is for the scythe. Now, the way these drops work is that they can drop regardless of what path, and they can drop regardless of what style you use. However, Rax will always use, if you're using an instance or using a pheromone, Rax will always use the style to which you are strong against. So if you're using ranged, Rax will use magic. Now, with this actually influences the drop slightly. If Rax is gonna drop a hilt, there is a higher chance of it being the type that Rax was using. Note, this is a higher chance, this is not a 100% chance. You can still get a fang when you're using range, for instance. But yeah, it's effectively the style you take does influence the drop slightly, and the path you take does influence the drop as well. So with the drop tables out the way, because they're quite confusing, let's jump into the actual kill itself. Now, before we start the actual kill, you're going to want to make sure that you have damage over time effects off of your standard rotation, because you can get reflected damage in this fight. So if you've got corruption shot or anything like that, take it off your revolution bar. You can have it like on a section that's not your revolution section, and you can use it manually, but don't have that to be auto used, because that will get you killed. Also, it's good to have devotion, freedom, anticipation, and your protect from range and protect from magic prayer switches. Now, obviously this guide is going to be for ranged only. So for this entire fight, except for phase 4, which I'll talk about later, we're going to be using protect from magic, and we're going to be using the tier 95 prayer for ranged. So, in Phase 1, Rax has 3 main abilities. The first one is a cleave, where he will pull you in towards him and he will cleave you, and this hits for a ridiculous amount of damage. 4 or 5k plus on 0 enrage. On high enrages, this is one shot. Now, there are 2 ways you can deal with this. You can freedom or anticipation beforehand, and then he won't pull you in. As long as you're at range, he won't actually hit you with it. Although he will always hit your familiar if your familiar is right next to it as well. So make sure your familiar doesn't die and you drop all your food. The second way to deal with this is when he pulls you in, quickly run back out before he's able to hit, and he will actually miss you, he won't actually hit you. So the second ability is that he will bind you in a web, and when he binds you in a web, you have to spam click somewhere else to actually break free. If you don't, you'll slowly just die and you'll be taking damage all this time. So another way of sort of dealing with this is if you use freedom or anticipation beforehand, it does require a lot less clicks to actually avoid. Now, the third ability, Araxxor will actually web himself, and what this means is that he'll put a web over himself and he will start healing 1000 every second, and this will last for about 5 seconds, but more importantly it will reflect all the damage that he has dealt back at you. This is why you don't want bleeds on your bar. Now, normally with bleeds, what I do is I wait until after he's used this and then I use my bleeds. So you definitely want to have auto retaliate off for this boss. You want to come off that boss as soon as he uses it, or you will take a lot of damage off it, and this is often what kills new players quite quickly. So he will never use, in Phase 1 he will never use the same ability back to back. Also, get used to sort of timing between abilities, so you can use freedom and anticipation on every ability, either or. So you can use it beforehand, so you don't get dragged into a cleave, or you can break out the bind quicker. Now, for what we're actually doing in this phase, for this next bit you're going to have to watch the Phase 2 part to know what to do. But when we enter the room, immediately as soon as we enter the room, we go to whatever web of the path that we want to do for Phase 2, and we effectively start burning that as soon as we can. Now, to transition the phase, it's not like normal where when Rax hits 0, when Rax hits 0, it's the next phase. No. If he hits 0, he starts healing himself. You choose when to move the phase on. So you will basically have to walk past the point where the web was, and then it'll move into the next phase. And the web will take a while burning, and once it's burnt you can enter the next phase whenever you wish. Now, you might think, why don't I just enter straight away into the next phase? Now, there is a reason why you might and you might not. Rax in Phase 3 will gain constant healing equal to the amount of health that he still had left at the end of Phase 1 and at the end of Phase 2. And this can be, so effectively he's got a combined hit pool of 300k for the first 3 phases. And if you reach 0 on a phase, aside from Phase 3, any more damage is not going to matter. At that point you basically have to transition the phase, unless you're stalling. Now, you might wonder, well, why wouldn't I just stay in Phase 1 then, until he's at 0? Now, this is going to link him with Path 1, the spider phase, which I will actually Weirdly, I'll cover path 1 last of the 3 paths, because it transitions a lot easier into phase 3. So, yeah, that's phase 1. He keeps these abilities throughout the entire fight. Up until a section in phase 4, but I will cover that in a bit. Now, before I cover any of the paths in phase 2, it's worth knowing that he keeps the same abilities as phase 1, but he gains 1 extra ability on every path, and this is that he will throw out a bomb periodically and summon 3 eggs. You want to stand on these eggs when this bomb hits, because it will reduce the damage it does to you, and it can really hurt if you don't absorb that damage. Also, any eggs that do not get destroyed by this bomb will spawn ats, so you wanna not have those. So I'm gonna cover first of all the acid path, which is the middle path, or path 2. Now, this is quite a simple phase in terms of it's mostly positioning. Now, before I cover the mechanics of the phase, he gains an additional ability in this phase where he will periodically throw a thing on the ground which will spawn a green spider, which you cannot attack, and it will travel towards you and has a duration. If this touches you, it's a one-shot. There's no protection against it. It is a one-shot. Regardless of your health, you will die from it. So do not get touched by this. Now, the mechanics of the fight. So first of all, you're going to have to stand Rax on a acid pool, which is the green section. Now, this acid pool has 100 acid in it, and this will actually go over and this will roll over into phases 3 and 4. There is a way of dealing with it. I will get to that in phase 3. Now, what you want to do is you'll see a bar on the top of your screen. You want to keep hovering over that, because the minimum acid level that you need on Rax is 55%. Once you have 55%, you can then take him up the ramp, get right to the very top, and he'll start leaking acid on the ramp. And so this is 55%. I recommend if you're new, leave it till 60%, just so a bit more breathing room. And then effectively you're just waiting until this acid wears out the ramp, and then the rock at the end will fall off and you'll be able to transition into phase 3 by clicking the rock. Make sure you do transition into phase 3 as soon as you possibly can, because you will take damage if you're on that rock after the phase is transitioned. Now path 3, which is the darkness path. Now, path 3 may well be the easiest for a new player to actually learn. However, it will be a very long kill and you'll be using up a lot of food. So the way this works is that you're not actually fighting Rax himself now. In fact, Rax only has 2 abilities in this phase. One's the darkness attack, where there's going to be a light beam somewhere in the room, and you have to stand in it. If you don't stand in it, you'll take damage that keeps ramping up. There's also the bomb attack in this phase. Now, she'll attack you with mixed range and magic. You can press switch for these. The green attacks are magic, the grey attacks are ranged. Now, to advance this path, you're going to have to do a quick time event, which it happens automatically after a certain amount of time. Now, Rax will do a certain animation with his legs, and you have to pay real attention to this, and you have to click the corresponding arrow. And then after, you'll avoid the attack and Rax will hit the wall and do damage to the wall. Now, the amount of health that Rax has at the end of this path is determined by the amount of dodges you managed. in the quick time event. Normally, it only takes like 2 hits on the wall to clear this path. Now, I will explain each of the potential formation of legs, as it were, for the quick time event. So, first of all, if he has his legs low, then you have to press down. If they're sort of spread across, like sort of in a pincer move, you have to press up. If they're to the left, press left, and if they're to the right, press right. I will have some slow motion on the screen of what these look like. So yeah, that's basically it for path 3 rather. Now, once that wall has broken, Rax will spawn in the phase 3 area, and if you're prayer switching, make sure you have your magic prayer back on for this, because it will really hurt if you don't. Now, you will probably still take damage from the darkness attack. You might have to just tank this and go into the phase 3 area, because this path is not big enough to deal with all of phase 3's mechanics. So definitely go into the phase 3 area. And yeah, good luck with this path. It's the most annoying one, that's for sure. I wouldn't recommend doing this. It is the easiest to learn, but you will use up a lot of food because you have no control over like how long the phase lasts, because you're not actually dealing damage to Rax himself. Now finally, path 1. If you're doing path 1, you're gonna probably want to transition into phase 2 as early as possible. Now, this path, aside from the bomb, doesn't have any new abilities from Rax. However, he will periodically spawn additional spiders, and he will spawn 20 of them total over the rest of the fight. And they are split into 4 waves of 5. And I'm gonna leave on screen a good way of telling what waves these are. In the first 3 waves, he will spawn 4 attack spiders and 1 support spider, in a certain order. Now, the support spider can be one of 2 things. It can be a mirrorback spider, which, if a mirrorback spider is up, then any damage that Rax takes will be reflected onto you, and it's much more powerful than the web reflect. It will kill you. The second one is a healing spider. I've forgotten the name, I'll put it on screen. But this will heal Rax constantly. Now, these support spiders are the priority. After you've killed the support spiders, kill the additional spiders. And in the meantime, like after you've killed all the ads, get back onto Rax. Just keep DPSing Rax down. And now, I generally transition this phase. By the way, you can transition this phase into phase 3 by walking further to the east. So I generally do this once Rax hits low health. Now, he will keep this number of spiders into phase 3 as well. So this whole spawning ad thing carries on through the rest of the fight until he runs out of spiders, and it'll be after the 4th wave of spiders. So, in phase 3, he will heal constantly at the start of the fight until he's run out of healing, and this amount of healing is equal to the amount of health he had combined from phase 2 and phase 1 left. In terms of abilities, he does the same standard 3 attacks he did in phase 1, however, they can be back-to-back now, so bear this in mind. He also keeps his bomb attack, which you have to use the eggs to mitigate. Now, he will also gain abilities based on the paths that were open. Note, this is the paths that were open, not the path you went through. So, for instance, if you did path 2 and 3, he will gain something from both 2 and 3, but he won't gain one from path 1, because path 1 is blocked. So, if you didn't do path 1, or if you did do path 1, what he gains is that he will spawn the adds that he did in phase 2. However, if you did do path 1, he will continue spawning as the waves were in path 1. Like he'll basically start where he left off. However, if path 1 was open and you did another path, he will start the waves from the start. So you'll have to deal with these quickly before phase 4, because if he kept any spiders from phase 3, that will become a problem in phase 4, and I'll cover what if this happens into phase 4. If you left phase 3 open, if you left path 3 open, or if path 3 was on the rotation, so it's brain fart there. If path 3 was open, he will summon a light beam somewhere in the room. Now you're going to have to stand under this. If you don't, you'll start taking damage, so you'll have to stand on this as quick as possible. So that's what he gains for path 3 being open. From path 2, he gains 2 mechanics. Now, the first one is that he gains the green spiders again, the ones that will one-shot you. He also gains a second type of green spider, and these are ones that can be targeted with the left click to lure. Now, what these will do is they won't attack you. Like, for all intents and purposes, you can ignore them at low enrages sometimes. But what they will do is, once you lure them and you can drag them under racks, it will heal racks for 5k, but will reduce the amount of acid that was left in path 2. Now, the amount of acid left in path 2 will increase the damage that Rax does in phase 4, based on the amount that was left. So, if you did path 2 itself, there'll be some left, but not as much as if you didn't actually do path 2 whilst path 2 was open. So, these spiders will reduce the amount of acid by 25 each. Now, they will also increase his damage in phase 3, so you're going to want to kite these under him sort of near the end of phase 3, so that he doesn't get the damage boost in phase 4, but so that he doesn't have much time of doing increased damage in phase 3. So that's sort of it for phase 3. Now, in phase 4 starts when Rax hits 0, and it gives a shortcut scene, and you're going to want to stall adrenaline during this. Keep your adrenaline as high as possible, because you're going to need it for this phase. Now, the fourth and final phase is with Araxxor, and she does a lot more damage than Araxxor. First of all, she will have 2 types of standard attack, and you have to press switch for them. So, she has the small grey ones, which are a ranged attack, which you have to protect range for, and she has the green ones, which are the magic attack you have to protect magic against. Now, for the first 50k, she keeps all of the abilities that Rax had in phases 1, 2, and 3, the standard abilities, the cleave, the bind, and the reflect. She doesn't have the bomb attack, and if path 3 was open during this rotation, she'll gain the darkness attack. She will also gain increased damage if path 2 was open, based on the amount of acid still left in the pool. And if you didn't kill all the adds in in path 1, she will start randomly spawning adds. And this is random, like, you don't want to mirror back spiders spawning randomly, which is why you want to get rid of all the spiders in phases 2 and 3. Now, once she hits 50k, she will stop using all of those abilities. The only ability she will now use is a core, which will come at 25k, which I'll explain in a second. So she's going to gain increased damage from 50k, and this is going to ramp up and up and up, and it's going to increase the longer the fight goes on. So at this point you want to nuke her down, and you want to keep on top of your prayer switches. Now, once she gets to 25k, she will spawn an acid core, which is sort of similar to the Corporal Beast core. Now, this core is annoying. It will hit you for about 2k typeless damage if it hits you, and usually you can down her before it hits you if you're using Onslaught or if you're using a lot of thresholds. However, if it is going to hit you, it will follow you very, very closely if you try and run from it. So it's actually better practice to let it hit you for one tick and then run away. And then it'll start bouncing around again. It'll take a lot longer to actually hit you again. So the best practice is to let this hit you once and then finish the rest of the boss. And that's sort of it for Rax, really. There's not much else to really explain. In fact, there's nothing else to really explain. If you die on Rax, the graveyard is basically where you right click to enter. You can right click enter graveyard. So yeah, that was my full ranging Rax guide. Hopefully you found it useful. So yeah, thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. Follow my other stuff on my channel, my Road to BVM Mastery series, where I will be including some of the clips from this guide, as sort of like the adventures I had whilst actually filming this. So yeah, thank you for watching, and see you guys later.